Hello, everyone, and welcome to 30 Days of Love, our sacred season of reflection, imagination, and action as we focus on love being the spiritual force for healing and liberation. And today we're exploring the theme Imagining Thriving. And it's truly an honor to be joined today by Dr. Elias Ortega, the president and professor of religion, ethics, and leadership at Meadville Lombard Theological School. He is a theologian, educator, and movement leader whose work invites communities to think boldly about justice, communal flourishing, and what it means to build institutions rooted in love and liberation. So, Dr. Ortega, thank you so much for being with us, and thanks for sharing your voice in this season of reflection.
You're welcome. It is my joy to be here.
Yes. Well, this week's theme that we're focusing on is imagining thriving. And so, just to kind of begin with, when you hear that phrase, what does it evoke for you, both spiritually, theologically, ethically?
Well, I think imagining thriving for me would have a number of several components. One, it's the ability to exercise the imagination, right? And for me, what that really means is to understand that there are other possibilities than the ones in which we are currently inhabiting. So um, that leads then to think that reality can be otherwise than what it is. And if reality can be otherwise than what it is, I think that provides new possibilities to think of what are the both not only the just arrangements that we currently inhabit, but what are the ways in which we have fallen short to create the possibilities and the structures for living into the beloved community that we hope for. So once we have those imaginings, then I think that becomes a bit of an assessment tool, right, to what is the realities in which we are currently inhabiting. So another way to put that, how new imaginings could lead to new possibilities, is thinking, what does it mean to be mission centric within an institution? And I think something that we oftentimes confuse is we tend to confuse the institution of a mission with the institution itself. When in fact, in radical imaginings, it can be the case that a mission of an institution outlives the structure of the institution itself, right? And that does not mean that the institution has failed in living up its mission, but in fact, it may be required for the institution to cease to exist to be mission centric, which is might seem counterintuitive,
Yeah.
right? But it's thinking about that imagining, like what does it need to be transformed in the ways in which we currently understand the world to be, and how do we kind of radicalize the ways in which we center the future and those who are yet to come, right, within the structures that we are inhabiting now.
Yeah, I love that so much. And it is a radical and often scary thing I mean, we're speaking to folks that are part of religious institutions, but in this
Mhm.
moment, um, I do agree. I think we are being called to think beyond the traditional structures and hierarchies and systems. And I kind of want you to dive into imagination a little bit more because I think you're
Mhm.
exactly right. It's such a powerful and underappreciated spiritual practice. And I wonder how, in your own faith, in your own UU expression, what does imagination look like for you?
In my own imagining, so I would say, I am not hesitating, but I'm thinking through the particular
Yeah.
ways in which the structures of daily lives currently, right, within the fast pace of entertainment and so many things that call our attention, right? Notifications left and right that keep becoming distracting, right, to the things that we do. Being always in contact and living the life in in what we tend to assume are private spaces, but are actually very, very public spaces of long-term memory, like social media spaces. And I think that being so busy and so connected at times really prevents the the spaciousness of time and attention required to live into the imagination. So I'm thinking the you know the image of sitting coasted with a book, right, with a cup of tea or coffee, and just spending, an hour, 2 hours immersed without interruptions, right, slowly in slow reading, whether it is fiction, right, or poetry, and the things that that can spark, right, in our own reflection and in our own ponderings. I think that's something that we do not oftentimes do enough in the current and kind of digital centric moment to let the imagination run wild,
Yeah.
so to speak. And I think when I think about our own spiritual practices, the image, or not the image, the phrase that is coming to mind is really the tyranny of time, right?
Mm,
And that is that we have to be ensure that if we are in a service, that we are, in and out within 55 minutes, right? And that means that any moment in which an aesthetic experience, right, can lead to something greater than what we have happened, it gets short circuit, right? Because we
mm,
have to get it done. An experience for me that comes to mind. I years ago I went with a friend to see experience a symphony. We were hearing this symphony,
mm,
and something that for me was really really impactful is the last note, right? The particular concert end up in an extended silence, right? And the conductor is conducting the band, all the musicians, and he holds the signal for that silence to last forever. Like what it felt like, right? It was a long time, and he stayed in that position. And I started looking around the room, and everyone was kind of forward, waiting, right, for the last gesture to be completed, for the concert itself to be done,
mm.
right? And I realized it's like, oh, how different would have been if someone was just thinking about the time that we have to be here, this moment, and then don't hold that silence. What it felt like, the experience of being held in that moment and taking all the beauty, right, that we have experienced, but instead do it quickly and then everybody erupting in applause and then leaving in the space, right? It felt very different, right, to be held in that moment of silence, right? That I realized it was not only for the musicians but also for the audience, right, to
Yeah.
slow it all the way down. So for me, that exercise of imagination then will require that willingness to kind of lead away or put away the journey of time, leave the phones behind, leave the watches, right, and be in a space that it is governed by the structures of presence, right? To be there not only with one another but for one another, so that we can collectively envision what can happen. And to do that, I think is not only in a corporate public space, but it also requires kind of a pre-work that may happen in private spaces, right? For ourselves to cultivate and deepen our own practices, so that we can enter in those spaces with the resilience, right, and the expansiveness of thought, imagination, time, right, to allow that to happen and be transformed by it.
Well, I really love that. I mean, again, reflecting on my own experience as a pastor of a church, so often religion becomes kind of a systemic practice that we just do. It's a very timed kind of set of rituals. But really, in this space, when there is so much chaos going on in the world and so much to cause us fear and anxiety, um, creating that space in our life and in our communities where we might be
Hmm.
able to allow imagination to emerge is so important. But it does require the discipline of slowing down. And I wonder what you would say to people right now who are the other side of this theme, right? Is thriving. But
Hmm.
in this world right now, it seems very hard for most people to simply survive. And having space for imagination and contemplation seems like a luxury for a lot of people. I wonder how you speak to that objection kind of in this moment.
Yeah, that is a good question, and it is one that I think um, we may be culturally ill-equipped, right, to answer. And I think part of that being ill-equipped has may have to do with um, what let me reframe the conversation, because I think that in order for me to be able to answer that truthfully of how I think about it, it's really a conversation about aesthetics and beauty and
Mm,
what the intersection between aesthetics, right, and beauty as a political category of both what is true and what is just is something that gets oftentimes lost in political debates in in the U.S. culture, right? I think the impact of the Red Scare, right, to push out thinking through the work of Marxist aesthetics, right, or revolutionary aesthetics have prevented some of that works to do, and I think some of the consequences. In Elaine Scarry, in a wonderful book, right on beauty, writes about this, right? How the beauty thinking about beauty gets rejected, right? Because one, it's maybe seen as being a fail aesthetic, right? That you're just thinking about a moment of pleasure without consent or without connection to reality, or kind of a failure to understand that there are other social and civic concerns, right, that impact our reality. But the opposite may be a more interesting proposition, right? If we consider that thinking about beauty and aesthetics can lead us to behold, right, what may be also true in the world, and true as in a better reflection of what the world actually is, then we may need to turn to works of literature, right,
mm,
works of art that can propose, right, and give us a glimpse into what our reality is right now or could be, so that our imaginations get sparked anew. So I'm thinking, the literature in Latin America, right, in the Caribbean, that has dealt for so long with the impact of totalitarianism, right, and repression, right, and how do you still craft works of great beauty,
mm,
but that are also challenging, right, to the regime, but also to the ways in which we failed, right, one another, is something telling, right, to enjoy both as an aesthetic experience and something to read good writing, but also to be exposed to the political power. And I'm thinking, one of my favorite novels is by Argentinian writer Julio Cortázar, and it's called Rayuela, and it was translated as hopscotch, right? And
mm.
in the surface, right, it may seem like a really odd novel. There's a lot of conversation around jazz in Paris, and this kind of three individuals that keep, engaging with one another over a period of time, right, in this Parisian scene. But underneath all that, right, is the reality of being an expat for political reasons, right? Because everybody's in Paris because they got expatriated for their politics. The writer himself, right, is an expat for political reasons. So underneath the conversation about jazz and aesthetics, right, and learning to live in another country, right, is that critique that we are here because of an act of violence and repression, and yet we're trying to figure out what did this mean, and have a life and fall in love and actually just be alive, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I think we in our own U.S. culture and aesthetic, we don't have those spaces, right? Our experience of the art is more about entertainment, right, than aesthetics themselves, right? The aesthetics that lead to beauty, right, that lead to reflection on the world.
Yeah. I love that. That's such an important, I feel like it's a very instructive spiritual posture to try to embody in this moment. And I kind of want to lean in a little bit
Actually,
to the,
if I may say something on that,
yeah,
I'm thinking about the practice in Eastern Orthodox traditions,
mm,
right, on prayers with icons,
yeah,
right, and themselves the particular aesthetic of icons, right. Of course, they are not to be representative of very realistic, right, human figures, but they are instead intended to be this connection, like an entry point into meditation or into prayer, into something greater. So it's not about the icon itself as a symbol, but it's that symbol is anchored into a transcendent, right, reality, that you may start accessing by spending time with the icon, right? So then you can go, so to speak, and travel, right, in that moment of introspection, reflection, meditation, prayer, the spiritual discipline, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
I would say for Unitarian Universalists, given that our legacy is more Puritan, right, which means that we don't have those tools necessarily available in the same way. And oftentimes we reach to other traditions, right, to incorporate some of those practices. And I wonder, right, whether or not that is part of that tension for us as a community of how to break through, right, some of
Yeah.
those structures, right, that
Yeah.
become ossified.
Yeah, I just can't help but thinking as you're talking. I mean, how obviously media has evolved and aesthetics have evolved, but the practice of sitting in an ancient cathedral a couple hundred years ago, where folks would just sit and meditate at the art that was on the ceilings and the walls.
Hmm.
And I feel my own millennial impulse saying, well, it's hard to maintain attention in a space like that. And yet, I'm a United Church of Christ minister. In my own Christian tradition,
Hmm.
that all the mystics came from that place of deep contemplation and the ability to sit and appreciate beauty. It's not just stillness. And I think that's where a lot of people in this moment um, have forgotten that aesthetics, beauty, contemplation of images and
Hmm.
nature actually is a portal into some deep well-being. Um,
Yeah.
I just wonder, though. I'm hearing the voices of those even in my own community where all of this I think is very helpful towards interpersonal spiritual nourishment. But there's also a moment, obviously, where we're seeing so much structural injustice at such high levels. All of our institutions, from the local church to denominations to seminaries, are wrestling with these questions. And I wonder, how do you think we should hold the tension between this imaginative space and actually confronting and being active in confronting injustice without one eclipsing the other?
Hmm. So, I think the danger is to be trying to find the careful word,
Yeah.
right, to say, because there is a particular kind of I don't want us to confuse a more hedonistic understanding of aesthetic, right? That
Mm,
is pleasure for pleasure's sake, right, or beauty for beauty's sake. If that understanding is disconnected, right, that there
yeah.
is a very political tradition, right, of beauty as what is truth, right. And I'm thinking this is dating back for medieval philosophy and even earlier. You still have conversations about the beautiful as being the truthful since at least Socrates, right, in the Western tradition. So this is not a new notion, right? But the kind of aestheticism, right, of
Yeah.
pure pleasure that is aloof, right, of the world and aloof of suffering, right, is not what beauty was intended to be, right? And
Mm,
again, I'm thinking of again icons, right, like
yeah.
the La Pietà, right? That is something that many folks go to see that magnificent work of art, right, of pain. But what if we see it in a different way? Right, it is sort of the suffering of a human for a beloved, right, that then spark into action.
Mm,
So spending time, right, in front of La Pietà should have that other theological moment, right? The ethical demand that arrests our attention so that that suffering
mm,
doesn't get replicated and therefore you act so that you can say it is beautiful and it is also truthful, right?
yeah.
Versus something different. And I would say this may be controversial, but something like for me, like La Mona Lisa, like
Mm,
it's like I mean, it's aesthetically great. There's many things in unique painting, but what exactly, right, is going to prompt you to do, right? I'm just
mm.
not sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. I'm just not sure. So I think that's part of that. Part of that. The other part I think is about restoration, right?
Mm,
Restoring the self and giving moments of rest, right? So that you can be energized, renewed, right, in order to enter into action, right? And I'm thinking if all that we are is in that moment of push against the system without rejuvenation, um, like we will burn out, right?
mm,
And we were past before our time.
yeah.
And I think doing that moment of caring is important. I would say the other part for me is that leaning into into the aesthetics as community can also then provide an avenue of refining the voice. Like what is the message,
Yeah.
right? That we collectively want to put forward and to what end. Um, and again, thinking about ancient philosophers, right? Aristotle once wrote that if truth loses, it's because it cannot speak well,
Mm,
right? So it is not about the nature, right, of the content of the speech, right, but not being able to communicate it well
mm,
can lead for truth, right, to be the base and not be as effective as it can be. And then that's why I think for me, Emily Dickinson say tell the truth, but tell it with a slant,
yeah.
right? Just how do you couch it in such a way that can be received
Mm,
and incorporated, right? So without having those moments, right, that I think are deeply deeply aesthetic and deeply can be also restful. I do not see, I don't understand how you move into more action.
yeah. I love that. What I'm hearing is a real invitation to intentionality in how we're
Mhm.
moving as individuals and communities. And I
Mhm.
know, again, it feels like in a frantic moment, you just got to do and say and react.
Mhm.
But there is something really powerful about intentionally slowing down, not allowing the circumstances to demand that we're constantly being frantic, so that we can
Mhm.
be precise and actually create the more beautiful world that we're
Right.
longing for.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Yeah,
I'm thinking, I'm a drummer, right? And
yeah,
one of the things that when you explore polyrhythms, right, and you are exploring polyrhythms also with a group, not only with other drummers, but in the context of a band or something, it becomes very important for everyone involved to stay in the pocket, right, to
mm,
stay focused, right, because polyrhythm can create this dissonances at time that it feels like you're getting dragged out of your own rhythm. But if you stay in your rhythm, right, there will be a point in which things will kind of cyclically come together and it will be really beautiful. And then it will move again into this moment of somewhat dissonance, but then it will come back again. Right. So,
mm,
so staying in your pocket and staying, staying there. And it's not as easy as it oftentimes sound. Right. But it's important. I've been in contexts in which, you have a drummer in a 4/7 beat and a drummer in a 4/4 beat and a drummer in a 6/8 beat. And it starts a little wild and everybody stay where you are, you
yeah,
know, stay where you are. It will come together. Just don't worry about
yeah.
it. Right, don't
I love
worry
it.
about it. Hmm.
It's such a good example. It really is. And
Hmm.
I'm thinking like directly now to faith communities that are listening, people that are part of UU congregations.
Hmm.
I wonder how you would what you would say to a community that is interested in creating this spaciousness and embracing aesthetics and beauty as a core spiritual practice. And I know many UU congregations are doing that already. But what does it look like practically if you were to step into a church
Hmm.
environment beyond a worship service? How do we incorporate this into the life of a community?
Yeah. Um, I think that they are. I wouldn't say there's not one entry point into this, but I also have experienced moments in which it can or it has been done haphazardly,
Hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
and and for me, that experience of being more haphazard is um, what has been the intention around it. So I'm thinking an example, a quilting circle. On the surface, it is about making quilts, right? But that is just the surface of it. They are a lot of storytelling embedded right in the process of making a quilt, right? And everyone who makes every square has a particular story, and not only a story, but a someone who created it. And oftentimes the expectation is that someone is recognizable so that generationally you can track, right? Who did what within that one piece of a quilt, so it becomes part of the collective memory, right? And folks may remember, right, those who were part of that moment. Those who were not can then remember, be reminded of who folks were through those stories. A quilt of beauty is part of the tapestry of memory, community building, both having place but generationally passing on, right? Some legacies. So for me, what that means is how do we open up the spaces that is not just about experiencing something that is beautiful, but enter into the act of co-creating an experience, creating an experience, because that will humanize us to one another, right? In the process of doing so. So it could be try to do a shared composition, right, together with
Yeah.
the choir. It may not be great in some way. You may not want to record it, right? And that is not really what is the most important part of it, right? Is the act of being co-creating together and being in that space, right? That can be beautiful and transformative. There is a clip oftentimes goes online of, I think it's Herbie Hancock, right, talking about playing with Miles Davis and in one occasion playing what he thought was a wrong chord, right? And he kind of being shocked. He said, "Oh my God, committed a mistake," and noticing that Miles was listening carefully and played a different note to resolve that tension,
Mm.
right? So it was not so for the audience. Right, it was, and even maybe for Miles, it was not a mistake. It was just something that happened, and a resolution, right, can be built upon that. But that requires just the deep attuneness, right, and the presence, right, to stay with the moment, be fully there, and honor the reality of another, and just make that as part of the moment,
Mm.
right, and add something to it, right, that creates the possibility of a resolution, right, too. And I'm thinking resolution in a musical context, right? You have what we call like 1 5 4, and then you return to the root note, right? So they create that moment. Um,
I love it.
mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's again, as you're talking, it is personally inspiring to think about a different posture of living where if you believe that your life is about creating beauty and
Mhm.
that your life itself, the story of life is an act of creation, then it allows you to even come across wrong notes or trials or
Mhm.
moments where things aren't going right and to see it with a different perspective, a more energized and perhaps hopeful perspective, because you know that there can be resolution. Beauty can come out of wrong notes that might take place along our journey. I really
Mhm.
love that.
Mhm.
And I think the kind of last question that I want to pick your brain about for folks that are listening is you're obviously very steeped in this space and very knowledgeable
Mhm.
about the role of beauty and aesthetics for ethical and just ends, but also for spirituality. I wonder where in the world right now you're finding aesthetic beauty that's giving you inspiration that folks who are listening might be able to tap into to both get their own nourishment and guidance, but also have some ideas. Yeah.
Um, for me, this is I'm laughing a bit because there's something that I have resisted doing it for years because this particular text have meant so much to me.
Mm,
Derek Walcott, who won the Nobel Prize on Literature, who was also a great painter. He's from the island, and he wrote this long poem. It's actually the length of a book. It's called Homeros, and it is basically a retelling of the Odyssey. right, from a Caribbean perspective. And I have read that book many times. I have taught the book in context, but something that I have never done is actually finish the book. The last two, 3 pages I have never read.
Wow.
And part of my discussion in class is like, do not tell me anything about those last pages because I do not want to finish this book. All right, because there's so much beauty for it for me, and there was so much inspiration and also challenge, right, that I found in it. Like there is a scene that you have this island person writing the name in the boat, right? And it's a phrase. It's supposed to be in God we trust, but it's misspelled. And a priest was going to correct him and try to sell it. It's like I don't care, right? This is my spelling and God's. Let it be,
Mm.
right? And I found it's like what an affirmation, right? Of
Wow.
of agency in the context. And it's like it's like well, God knows what I mean.
Yes.
So don't trouble yourself by that. The
I love.
spelling doesn't matter.
Mm.
And I was like, oh, so I'm committing myself to actually finishing the book in this season. It's like
Wow.
I want to know how it ends now.
I love
I
that.
want to know how it ends, which means that I have to take time to read it again
Yeah.
from the beginning, right? Because I want to get there. Um, and for me, that's a bit of a more kind of serious moment of thinking through that moment. Another thing that I think we can do. Um, I've been exposing myself to different kinds of music that I will not necessarily seek out in the beginning, like normally, right? There, I
Yeah.
know this might be a normal experience for many of us. We have particular styles and particular artists that we feel really comfortable with and just stay there. But I decided to explore other sounds, right, and other polyphonies, and part of it has been to find new sources of inspiration, right, new language, right, so to speak, new rhythms. I have a friend of mine who jokes because I oftentimes share with friends like what I oftentimes name like new artists to me. Right, this is an artist that I heard for the first time, and a friend jokes that you have really big ears because you find all this stuff, and I realize it's like, oh, that's something that I'm doing intentionally,
Mm.
to just spark other ways of understanding and other ways of interpretation, because our old patterns have gotten us here, right? So I'm not sure that those patterns can also get us out, right, of this moment. Um, and I think that's kind of what I will say. Those experiences are important, and I think finally, just a deep on this kind of deepening our understanding that art and aesthetics are social, right,
Mm.
enterprises, and as such, are also very, very human. And the things that we experience can be daily, in ways that we may oftentimes miss, like a beauty. If you're fortunate to have a wonderful meal, right, there might be a beauty in it, or the beauty in conversations, right? Friends. I have a friend that I love to hear laughing, right? So every so often make a point to hear because there's something about how they laugh that bring me joy,
Yeah.
right? And it's hard to explain except that it is, right? So I want to do that,
Mm.
or favorite book, favorite story, and spend some time with it anew, right? Turning
Mm.
it around a bit and sharing it with others, uh, in, indiscriminately of what they may think or not about it on your
Yeah.
behalf. I think that is important, and as a faith community, right? Who I think we're oftentimes so shy, or prevent ourselves from deepening too much in the faith. I think finding time, right, to in the moment to do the work, of singing hymns more than once a
Mm.
time, or a particular verse, right? I think in the thing in the living tradition, our first hymn, right? May nothing evil cross this door, right? So I grew up with the Christian version that
Mm.
is still very meaningful to me, and the UU version, it speaks to me in a different way, right? But not so disconnected from the old way.
Mm,
And there's lines that oftentimes jump out to me that, even if the walls be thin, right, but they be strong enough to keep love in and keep hate out.
mm,
It's like, oh my God, we can do so much theological work with that, right? In the frailty of life and the frailty of the moments, but we can still be strong enough, right? Even if it's just by a little bit,
mm.
right, that we can keep hate out, right, and hold love in. That for me, I still remember the first time that I heard it, right? It's like that was the image that it's like, yes, that speaks to me.
Wow. I love that so much. And Dr. Ortega, I just want to say thank you. I mean, I honestly feel refreshed and more hopeful from our brief conversation today. And for all those who are watching, I'm just very grateful for you helping us get our minds around this idea of imagining thriving and the role that beauty can play in renewing us and refining us and helping us live in alignment with the love that is at the center of our UU faith. So thank you for taking time to be with us and sharing your wisdom today.